All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining in this Friday, 8/28. We have a wonderful guest that we're going to be speaking with. I'm going to be speaking with, and you can too. Join in with the chat. We'll be able to see it and we'll be able to converse and go back. So ask your questions. We have a wonderful person that has been with us for since the inception of the Homeschool Connect Expo. And I'm going to introduce Dianne Craft, and she's going to explain a little bit more about what she does and what it's amazing. So I can't wait to get in and start speaking to her. But yeah, just join in if you want. Chat with us on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get your questions to Diane and be able to answer those. So right now, I'm going to hand it over so she can introduce herself to you. But thank you again for being a part of this and being a part of our expo and doing what you do. So can you introduce yourself and explain to us what your business is?
Hi, Sam. I'm Dianne Craft. I'm a special education teacher, certified natural health professional, and a former homeschool mom. In this talk, I'd almost like to call it the journey of a special education teacher as she learned about her students. But what we're really going to talk about is after homeschooling, I went back to the schools and I taught resource room. And I learned so many things that are so applicable to just plain our homeschooling. For one example is I taught elementary kids. Then another year I would teach in a middle school. So these are kids all the way from second grade, some of them through ninth grade. I want to give you a typical student. Casey was a young man that I remember very well. Tall fellow. He came into my sixth grade. I had sixth, seventh, eighth grade that year in language arts. So I had pull out language arts, which is pull out reading, pull out writing, and very often pull out math classes. So Casey came to me with a Woodcock Johnson that had just been done because they're tested every year with their achievement and every 3 years for the IQ, etc. So his Woodcock Johnson was a 2.2, which is second grade, second month. He and just about all of my other middle schoolers were like that. Second grade, second month. I just couldn't seem to get past that. Sometimes they got second grade, 6th month. And he was spelling words, was W-U-Z. Now, I said to myself, I had about 8 to 10 of these boys in the pull-out classes, and I would read their files and read where they were, the gains they had made. We have, IEP meetings every week, and these didn't even all need to be IEP kids. They were just kids who were learning the traditional way. Traditional interventions weren't working for them. He had been, and all of them had been in pull-out small classes, whether it was special ed or just an intervention. A lot of intervention classes are done now that are independent of the special ed label, and that's just fine. So they were being pulled out. He had been for like 4 years. And in 4 years, he gained up to second grade reading level and spelling the word was, W-U-Z. And I remember saying to myself, okay, God, you gave me these guys, like with Moses, you gave me these people, and I love them, but I need skills. Because if I would have done just what they had done, the traditional interventions, how would I expect to be any more successful with them? Because I didn't have any magic that I could do just by liking and loving them a lot. Everybody was doing that. Good families, good kids, good interventions. They just were not working for them. So I put in these interventions after I just kind of traveled around many states and learned about the brain, and then started applying them and talking to the parents, and we put together a program. And so I'm going to share with you what I call the resource room plan that you can do at home just as easily as I did in that little classroom. I didn't have them for any more time. I didn't have them in any different groups, just exactly we fit in a classroom method. So I'm going to show you, but at the end of the year, Casey had made 2.5 years growth in reading and 3 years growth in spelling. And that was just the beginning. So all the kids do. How did we do that? Because instead of going after the teaching method that for them, nobody's fault, but it was slipping away. Nothing had any memory hooks on them. They were just supposed to memorize it, and people did repetition, and that normally would work. It just didn't with them. So I learned a different method of teaching, and with that method, you can use that too. So we're going to show you how to teach your child using his brain more efficiently while still teaching the subject. I was responsible for their growth in the subject, so I needed to use different strategies to get that growth in the subject. But you'll see the same way. Your school day will go much faster with fewer complaints, because as we use a little bit more of what we call a right brain method, which is just zany, emotional, colorful, those types of things that we add to the teaching, you're going to get fewer complaints because, first of all, they're going to feel successful. So I'm going to show you how the teaching includes color, picture, chunks of information, things you didn't know before. I'm going to show you how I focused in on skills and not so much grade level. And by the skills, that just drove the grade level high. As a educator, I teach in colleges and I teach graduate level classes to teachers. So they take teachers recertification classes from me all the time. They implement these methods in their own classroom, and then they write up case studies and their final paper. So I want to just give you a quote that I have from one of the teachers. She said, "It is such a relief to not to have to say, you'll just have to memorize that. I now have tools to give my kids so that everything sticks in their memory now. They all feel so smart. I'm getting addicted to the smiles." And that's exactly right. You just never want to go back to the old way. Not everybody needs this type of teaching. They might like it, but they don't need it. But for my students, if I just had done the same old way, I would have gotten the same results. And so I'm going to show you the discovery of this little special education teacher who has got to give her a path to make learning easier for these kids. And I get now, I've done this so many years, that I get letters from kids in college. They're writing their science papers, or they've opened up, they're an entrepreneur and opened up their own businesses. And they still use some of these strategies. You'll find you will like some of them too. So if you look at the vendor page, you will be able to get a handout and download that, and it's going to have all the different ways that I'm going to talk about here. And we have, of course, many other pieces of information, articles on our website. But we have, when I set this up, I realized that, number one, what's going on with these kids? We're called disconnected kids. Not like they're disconnected from the world, but they have a connection that is not easily made between the left and right hemisphere. When I think of Casey, what I discovered with him is that, like many of them, he was looking at the word, he was trying to read, he was looking at the word was, and he called it saw. Not all the time, but just once in a while. And then he'd call on no. Well, that told me that if once in a while he read a word backwards, that told me there were 5 other times he was having to think about it while he was reading. Well, let's just compare him to the typical population that was not struggling with reading. For them, they learned how a B and a D and letters go from left to right. They concentrated on that with their left brain, and then just in 6 months, that went over into their right brain, which is the automatic brain. So they never have to think about it. When you read, you don't have to think about which way an L turns. But see, these guys still had that little handicap. They had to always think about, and the more tired they got, so the reading would start smooth and end up choppy. The more tired they got, the more they had to think about which way letters went. Well, just think, you see, so they couldn't fill their brain up with all the words that everybody else is learning, all the phonics rules, all the spelling rules, because they had to reserve a lot of memory space and a lot of energy to just plain keeping letters in their place. So the first step, I did a 2-step program with my boys. And I say mainly boys because 8 out of 10 of them were. So I did a 2-step program with them, and that's how we got our 2 and 3 year growth every year. The first step is correction. The next step is going to be compensation. The correction is what I discovered from people much smarter than I am, is that it's all about the importance of the midline. So these guys don't have an internalized a midline, so they have to think about whether they go left or right. When they are writing, many times, like I had an 8th grader named Jared, but he came into my classroom as JR. And he was the best wrestler in the class, in the whole school, 1,000 kids in this middle school. And the high school teachers or coaches were coming to recruit him to go to their high school. I didn't know they did that for middle school, but they do. At the end of the year, JR came up to me and said, Mrs. Craft, my name is really Jared, and I love that name. But he said, I stopped calling myself that because every time I would write Jared, I would write Jerub with a B, and everybody would make fun of me. Now, granted, he was a wrestler, so they didn't make much fun of him. But you see, no one had identified that the reason, and I only did because God led me down that path to people who have figured this out. But the reason that he was not writing and was having trouble reading, one of the main reasons is everything was scrambling for him. And so we start our morning. Everybody, we just put a little tape on the floor, and so everyone stood in front of them, and we did 6 midline exercises that helped their brain and body, like the I-8 exercise. And we're going to talk about different exercises that we did, but just took that whole thing, like for reading, if I would just do that, would take 6 minutes. When we came in for the writing class, that exercise took 15 minutes. We just added that to our 45 or 50-minute reading session. Every day, 4 days a week, we did crossing the midline, crossing the toe, opposite hand, and knee. All the midline exercises that you can learn. I wrote a manual called Brain Integration Therapy, so parents could do this at home. Other teachers, we have teachers all over the country doing this. Or you can outsource it and go to a place like Little Giant Steps or NACD. They will walk you through it and do this with your child. Our brain balance, they all get at the midline. But I found, of course, in my school, we couldn't afford to outsource. I was the outsource. So we just did those exercises a day, and once a week we did a brain training. So once a week they came in the classroom, they got to listen to stories on tape while I worked with them one-on-one. During the week, it was just exercises. So that was the foundation. And I think Sam mentioned the foundation. The foundation of learning is that, first of all, things aren't moving all over for you, either auditorily, because that scrambles for them trying to remember. They'll spell girl as grill because it scrambles. So we are going to create those connections. So that then, that was the first part. We did that all year long. Would have parents and teachers would come around Christmas and say, hey, they're writing like crazy now. Or their writing they don't have spaces all over. Or the math, and not doing all their math problems in their head. So we saw this working, and we have seen it working. And everyone tells us that who has the time to put that in, or maybe just the knowledge. So then that takes care of the correction. Now I had the rest of the session. What would I do for reading? Now, I could have done phonics is how do we teach normally reading? We teach intensive phonics. Intensive phonics is fantastic for reading, not so helpful for spelling, and we'll look at that later. But for reading, how do we teach reading usually? We have intensive phonics, either using tiles, which is nice, or rules, phonics games. We repeat lessons. We have them memorize rules. And all of that was done. They were pulled out to do that for many times. And again, if that had worked, they wouldn't be my students. So if they were going to be my students, I was going to go through a different door. I still, of course, needed to teach phonics for decoding long words. And so the way I did it is we just did it not the same old way. We embedded. So knowing that the right brain holds on to the picture, and that's our long-term memory is the right brain. Left brain's our short-term concentrating memory. So when we learn something new, like let's say the sound of AU is ah, we learn that in our left brain, it transfers over to the right brain, says, got it. Now can move on to something else. See, these guys never got to the got it stage. So I said, okay, how can we do this? We embedded. We took care of the corpus callosum that we are making stronger connections for by doing our exercises during the year. That takes during the year to connect. Each time we do it, we make more connections. But I also needed to teach them right away to get that 2 to 3 year growth. So we did like the AU, we put on the picture of a saw. And what do they do with typical phonics cards? Typical phonics cards will have maybe the picture of the saw on the top of a card, and on the same card they'll have AU, maybe AW. But this, and for a child who has a lot of connections, it's a great way to learn. You don't need anything else. For my students, the AU, AW went in their left brain, the picture of the saw went in the right brain, and they never connected. So we embedded them. We did this. We have some cards we made. Oh, you can make your own cards. The whole key is to put the left brain sound on right brain picture and always keep it in front of them on the table. I remember having Eric Rodriguez. He was an 8th grader, and he said, Mrs. Craft, I used to always guess that all those words that had AU in it, I couldn't remember that sound. Now, anytime I'm reading and I see AU, I remember the picture of the saw. And we did that with every phonics sound. So our phonics lessons had no memorizing. We just taught by the picture. That's where all the memory is held. No rules, no writing, no memorization, and no games. Even though I love the games, and the kids would play the games, it just didn't transfer over into the reading. So I created something called the Right Brain Phonics Reading Book. You can look at that. You can even make it yourself. What it is just we took the decoding units, we put them in color. And color stimulates the right brain. Weird humor stimulates the right brain. This is how we could go from a non-reader to a 2-syllable reader in just like a month. And then after that, we get into 3 syllables. And pretty soon we're doing investigation and soliloquy. Hard to imagine that we maybe started from cat and went that fast. How you can stretch them, because what we did is we set our timer for 20 minutes and we read long words with the decoding unit in color. So if they could get cat, they could get napkin, because it's 2 CVC words put together. We stretched them, pulled them. We didn't learn to mastery anymore because they were like, 13, 12, 13, 14 years old. We did not need to master every time an A was in there, because we needed to get into real words using decoding units for sure, but real words. So the whole thing is reading long words with a decoding unit in color, 20 minutes a day. You can see it would be impossible not to make a 2-year girl doing that. At the end of the year, my guys would often bring a crumpled up piece of paper out of their pocket and say, Mrs. Craft, look at this long word. Let's put that up on the board. We can sound that out. And they would look at all the pieces they knew. Did they know the shun at the end? Did they know the in the beginning? Did they know the inten in the middle? Then it's what? Intention. Oh, see, they have such a good hearing vocabulary that all they have to do is get close with this different, sometimes they call me the phonics whisperer, because sometimes if we couldn't they were so brittle with crossing the midline with their auditory processing until we could do enough midline exercises to correct that. So they would say, like napkin, they'd go napkin, napkin, napkin. Pieces, pieces, pieces. Left brain is New York pieces. Right brain's Hawaii. We're all smooth. So they repeat napkin. So I said, let's just say that 5 times each. Napkin, napkin. So it still didn't connect. Often just saying it 5 times each will. So I said, let's whisper it. Oh, whispering always sent it over into the long-term memory, into the whole, from the pieces to the whole. So that's why they call me the phonics whisperer. We only needed to do that until we'd made enough connections with that brain integration therapy. When I got to March, I wasn't doing that anymore. But I could have been doing it all the way up till Christmas. And so that's what we do. We teach reading in a different way. We teach the phonics. Then what we do, sight words. How do we teach sight words? Well, we don't just repeat them or send them home, which we used to have to do. So what we did is, again, we embedded. We made a chunk. So for my, you'll have, the Y is little boys sliding down the slide, and the M has mom's eyes looking at them, and they're hollering, my slide, my slide, my slide, for the word my, M-Y. So we do that when they're first starting to read. So we can get anybody to read in just, an afternoon by putting pictures on the words. And people say, well, they're not always going to have pictures on the words. Oh, no, don't underestimate their photographic memory. The next time they see that word in black and white, all the color stays on it, which means the meaning. What have we done? We've given them a hook. So just like with the phonics, this is teaching a subject with a memory hook embedded. If we don't put a memory hook, even though it's a good way to teach, it would slide away. You've got to put a memory hook on it, and the memory hook is color, picture, weird, emotion, irreverent, brown stuff. They love bodily fluids. You put some bodily fluids on that letter, we can get them to spell anything and read any word, and then take it away, and it's in black and white, and they see it anyway. And that is the way I stair-stepped these boys out of special education learning disability with dyslexia, dysgraphia. It was real fun to do, and you will find that you can do it too. So we take these sight words and we chunk them. In fact, we have our Craft Right Brain readers where we actually, for the sight words in that story, we made this story with the sight words with having the pictures directly on the letter, not underneath. Remember, otherwise the picture goes in the right brain and the letters go in the left. No, chunk them. And as you do, they love learning. They can learn, some of them, they learned 11 in a day. We don't just teach them in one day and expect them to know it, but they often do, and they can spell it. And so they can write what they spell. And that's what I discovered as I put all these things that I learned in the classes. I traveled around, and June Jackson taught some things on visual spelling. Someone else taught about the midline, and I put it all together. And this is just a charming way in 45 minutes to get a child feel better about themselves right away. We get them in touch with a smart part of themselves when they couldn't remember the sight words at all. How do you remember what? They go, well, hat. We put a little picture on it, and the H is this chimney, and the A is Cinderella saying, what happened to my ring? And it'll be right in. We put a little story, but most important, the story's auditory. The story is weaker than the picture. The picture with emotion is stronger. Picture, and if a child isn't remembering it yet, we haven't made enough connections, then I do picture with emotion with blood. Oh, blood is a wonderful folder. And if not, then find another embarrassing story like gas. All of those will hold on to it, and they'll see the word, and immediately the name will come up. They'll feel they have hooks. You created a climbing wall for them. And it's just wonderful to see. I've had even the most recalcitrant readers who struggled. Sometimes I'd be in a school where they were gang members. Next time I'd be in a school with country club members. It didn't matter. If you make them feel smart that first day, by showing them how to use their photographic memory, they'll do anything for you. And they really stuck in with that. With oral reading, we do oral reading without tears. Number one, we never interrupt them when they're reading, because if we do, that flow interrupts, and then we are always wanting to read to the audience. We want to impress our audience. And who's the audience? The child. We need to impress them. They need to hear themselves sounding smart. So before we read anything, we don't have them look at page cold. If I had a group, we sat around the chalk table, the chalkboard, and I'd write all the words on there. I love flip charts because you can go back to them versus whiteboards. Flip charts for me get it at the Office Depot. And I would write every word in that story that you're going to read that I thought even possibly could have trouble with. We read them some places, some words we could sound out, other words we had to put a picture on to remember it. Then when they read the story, They would often just quickly look at the chart and they would see the word. If they got it wrong, you just keep it in your head. The next day, before they read again, you're going to talk about those words. Don't do it at the time because they're too skittish. And in their head, we're giving the wrong message. I learned about basically pig duct tape to keep that on. So we always do pre-teaching. We never have them look at anything cold, and we never interrupt them. Put lots of zany memory hooks on all their words. You can't put too many. If a child, we occasionally have this isn't common, when they have a reading comprehension issue. That is so fun. For 10 minutes a day, I would read something to them, usually jokes or a little mystery, and I'd have them look up because we know the physiological movement of the eyes up lights up the right brain. So I just pulled down the screen like we would have for our overhead projectors, which is what we use then instead of smart boards. And they would look up, and then I would read a section like the beaver weighed between 30 and 40 pounds. And I'd have them look up on the beaver. We would write in white drippy paint, 30 to 40 pounds, put that up. And we would do sentence after sentence. And then when they were done, we'd rewind it and they'd tell me the whole story by picture. 10 minutes a day with using jokes or mini mysteries or all sorts of little things that have a finite little story to them. And they learn how to use their visual memory. Then later on, you read 3 lines. Or as the year goes on, you read the whole thing. Then later on, they read out loud and tell you the picture they saw. Then they read silently and tell you the picture they saw. This is how so many kids have improved their scores on ACT reading and anything. Comprehension, we don't use any computer games. We don't use any workbooks, no worksheets, no writing. We do completely by taking a picture. I'm making a movie in their head. Isn't that why you read? Because you really love to make you see the movie in your head. Oftentimes we say, "Oh, that movie wasn't as good as the book." Why? You mean that movie wasn't as good as the movie that you made? But you see, we assume everybody is making a movie in their head with comprehension. They just need to have practice with main idea and all that. No, they need a movie in their head. Then main idea and all of that, of course, is embedded in there. Do you see? Just a different way, getting in the teaching using a back door. My very favorite thing to do, if a child was at all not sure of themselves, was to teach spelling, a spelling word. I had one year, I had a boy named Jeremy, and I was teaching, had a little group of 5 around my kidney table, and I was putting the cards up high that I wanted them to spell. And one of them was is. And I had the I being shaky and nervous because the S was a snake with his tongue coming out almost on him. Is he going to bite me? Remember, emotion is what holds. Just color, if you just use color, you're thinking about doing right brain, but you're really not into that. It's picture, color, weird, emotion, embarrassment. All of that works really well. Hollywood knows that, don't they? That's how they get us to remember a lot of things. So we're going to use it in a good way. So I said, so Jeremy looked at me, he said, "Mrs. Craft, do you have an easier word?" And I said, "Well, Jeremy, that would be I don't, but what's a word that you think you could never spell?" And he said, "Lamborghini." And I thought, oh, well, hello. I didn't know how to spell Lamborghini. So I looked it up. Did you know there's an H in Lamborghini? Well, that became our tailpipe. So we took that word Lamborghini and we put all sorts of different jazz on it. So when he went across the hall, then back to his 2nd grade classroom, Mrs. Ellison, who was a very good teacher, she said, "Okay, Jeremy, what did you learn today?" He said, "I know how to spell Lamborghini." She said, "No, I mean, of course, that's not a 2nd grade word." And she said, "Let's do it." So he did it. He took the whole board to write it. So he said, "I can even do it backwards." So we teach these kids how to spell psychology forwards and backwards, like Psychology, YGOLOHCYSP. I can still see the colors. I did that with my students. So why do I do psychology for a child who has to learn and or with? Because I want to show them how smart their brain is. Because they can't spell like their brothers or sisters. They think that their brain isn't as good. No. We just need to use a different door. Now, we're going to use the back door, side door, whatever we're going to call it. We're just going to use that door. In psychology, we had the P and the Y in black letters. And then we had the S he was like in green, and the Y was shaking. He's very nervous because no one remembers him. The CHO, we had the H, they were all in a movie together, and one of them had gas. And the H had gas, and it was all coming out of him. So in the C and O, we put these faces, we're crying, and pretty soon we saw little brown blobs come out. And then in the log, which is the next part, we had ants all over and trying to eat things. So that's how you can see it forwards and backwards. Kids tell me they still use this in college for their anatomy and physiology. It's words. So we are finding that instead of phonics, let's not use phonics for spelling. That's very unpredictable. For my guys would spell Saturday, Saterday. Well, Erirur, there's no way you could know unless you took a picture. So what we did, the U, we just put some waves in there, had a stick figure diving in, and the R was shaking because the water was cold. So on Saturday, they sat around all day, and he went diving into the pool, but the water was cold. Now, if he would try to dive into an E, bonk, he'd hit his head and get brain damage, wouldn't he? We don't want to be responsible for brain damage. So my kids never got that word wrong again. And not only at the end of the week, but they could, when they were thinking about a story, they didn't have to think about the spelling words because they were now in the automatic hemisphere because of the picture and color. So that's why they got it right even in their papers. So use a lot of emotion, a lot of memory hooks. If a child isn't remembering a word, they haven't put enough blood on it. So all we can do is use all those skills that we have. And what does it cost? A list of words is what we use, the 1,200 most commonly used words. And we use color, picture, weird humor. We do have the Craft Right Brain readers, which we have all the first and second grade readers all jazzed up for you with color in it. But you can get it anywhere. You can do it yourself. Just look at that and do it yourself if you like. So we did the same thing for writing class. I pulled them out. We got rid of the reversals by doing a writing 8 exercise that would cross the midline. We got the kids' eyes working better together by using those eye exercises so the eyes could work together as a team without skipping, jumping, and would identify midline. So in our writing class, we did everything on the board. We had no workbooks, no worksheets, no new curriculum, but by the end of the year, they were usually writing about 4-page papers, all doing it on the board using blobs, showing them how to think. And again, if we get rid of the reversals, they don't have problem spacing with those guys who are resistant to writing. So then, of course, we do our zany corrections after they write a paragraph. Then we correct it, but they only get a point for everything right they did. Oh, you started with the capital letter. Oh, look at you ended with the period. That's a point. Oh, look at that cool adjective you gave, tall. And what do they say? Really tall. Oh, 2 together. Or gigantic. Oh, that's worth more. And we would give them points. And I tell you, even my 8th graders would do anything for those points, for a piece of bubble gum. In one year, I had 2 5th graders. They said, Mrs. Craft, it's Wednesday. There's an assembly today, but this is writing day. Does that mean we don't get to write? I said, well, no, we'll find time to write. They loved getting points. And then what if they spell something wrong? Like one little girl said, Mrs. Craft, don't you see he spelled love wrong? Oh, no, I didn't notice. Because next week in their spelling list and the cards we make for spelling, love is going to be there. But why bring it up when we're doing a paper? We only do positives. It's amazing what they'll even audit you as you're counting the points. They say, okay, I think you got 7 points. No, look at that one. Oh, yeah, it's 8. They care. And it's such an important thing for them to do. And then we had a math class where we just taught, as you can imagine, all the math facts, all with color, picture, weird, humor, blood, broken leg, skiing accidents have to happen sometimes in order to hold on. You know, I was in 8th grade teaching Mrs. Beecher's math class with her, and she would teach the lesson. And then we'd go down the hall with usually my 5 groups, and we did our 5 kids of the group, and we did our zany memory hooks for what she just taught. Well, next week she'd say, okay, you kids are doing really well on the test. Can I send Joey and Janie down? Sure. Well, pretty soon I was Pied Piper, having 10 kids go down after she taught the lesson. Until 5 days, she said, okay, I'm going to give you this side of the board. So when I'm done with the lesson, you draw a memory hook. And that's how we did PEMDAS, first for algebra, what are the processes of operation? First, you do parentheses, then you do exponents, multiply, divide, add or subtract. But we did P for the P was the earbuds, the earphones on a teenager's head. So that was the parentheses. And then we had an exponent necklace that was scratching his neck, an X on his shirt, and his belt had a division sign, and one knee was an addition, the other was subtraction. And she said, so funny. Later on in the year, they'd have a test, and everything would be erased, and she'd see them looking up at that side of the board, and all those pictures are coming to them. So these are ways that I called my resource room alternative teaching strategies that make learning just so easy, and you're going to get smiles. They'll feel better about themselves, but more importantly, these are very measurable goals and very measurable increases in reading and spelling and writing that they make. So if you're interested in this, please just download that from the vendors, and you can do this yourself. It's just not hard. And you can just do one part. So you just want to do the spelling. You just want to try the math. Try the strategies, use their photographic memory, and have fun. This is Dianne Craft at diannecraft.org, DIANNECRAFT.org. I have 25 articles on there. Many of them is how to do right brain spelling, how to do right brain math, all sorts of things. And why do we say right brain? Not that right brain's better than left brain. It's just that that's our long-term memory storage that these kids haven't developed yet. Thank you.
Awesome. I I love what you just went through, because I mean, all my kids are grown. But they all learned a little differently. But now we have this whole huge group of people coming into homeschooling world that might have never thought they would ever do this. And they're seeing their kids in a different light. They're understanding they might be ahead in some places and might be behind in some places, and everything. And so I think that's someone like you can come beside the parents and give them the opportunity and the tools and the thoughts of you are not you're not alone. And I love what you do, because it is a very, I, I I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's a
It's
simple
simple.
thing to, yeah, I mean, but it is fundamental. It's if you can get these things down, because the one thing you don't want to do is to have a kid
Yes.
think that they're stupid or that they're behind,
Yeah.
especially if they have siblings. I mean, it's almost a dangerous place to be in, because of just the emotions and what happens and everything else. And so I love, even when you're talking about when you're doing when the kids are speaking or are reading the book or the line or the page, don't interrupt them right then and there. I had never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
I would have never thought. I would have probably interrupted, but
Thinking you were being helpful.
yeah, yeah, and I just would have never thought of not interrupting, and even those little bits and pieces, you
Mhm.
know, that you can you have. So you've created some books and some other things that's on your website. Um,
I have. We put together basically a curriculum for language arts and a curriculum for which is reading and writing, and we have lots of ideas for math. How to get algebra things to stick, how to get them to subtract when they haven't memorized their addition facts. We just don't believe in doing slower, louder, or multiple repetitions. But
yeah,
they can't go on to subtraction unless they do their addition fact. We said, yeah, that is if we couldn't figure out another way. And there are lots of ways that they can do it so fast in their head, it looks like they've memorized. I always tell my kids, My job was to make them look good. So for my 8th graders for reading, we got the Colorado driver's license manual. And that was our reading subject for. So it was great because I got to stretch them into much longer words than they normally would. But we always do pre-reading. Remember, you never read anything cold because we never want anyone to sound dumb to themselves.
Yeah.
So we put all the hard words up there. Well, administration, what are we going to do with that? I don't know that word. Then we break it down. Motorcycle, they learned all those rules. So that's the fun of it is you just get in. It's like we always say we're those kinds of people that if you're stuck down in the mud in the side of the road, we jump right in. We don't send down a rope. Oh no. That's not the way. Yeah, we say, oh, and we just do a lot of wondering. When they get a word wrong, we said, oh, I wonder. Instead of try that again. Look it again. One more try. Remember the 3 most useless words are don't you remember? Not like we would notice if they did remember. So we just say, oh, I can see why that would look like that, why admiration looks like admonishment or whatever it was, or a much smaller word. Why, oh, I see what you're doing. Oh, it could be. I wonder. And then we rewrite it in little pieces. That's why I use that I have it down in my basement. I still can't get rid of that flip chart for when we just play with words. So you see, that's what we call the phonics whisperer. We basically play with words and we stretch them. I just had a wonderful mom called yesterday, and he's 14. She said he's the most compliant young man. He could put every piece of machinery together, but she said he just can't read. And she had gotten a hold of this material, and he was now reading 2nd grade. Sounds like Casey, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, all right. Now, tomorrow, because she was doing it to mastery, to keep doing that one over till you got them all right. I said, oh no, who cares whether we get cat or can? It's just a typo when we say it wrong. We just ignore that. 75% is correct because we need to move them on. They need to get ready for whatever they have planned in life. So I said, start with a shun tomorrow. And put down TION, shun. We know shun, 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 shun. If we know that, then what about if I put HC in front of it? And then put a little K inside, because that's always what C says, is K is always pregnant with K. We don't know why, but that's the way that is. And then it's action. Oh, okay, I know that one. Oh, I said, what if I would put this in front? I put men. Oh, I guess that's mention. Oh, gee, well, then I wonder, what if I put NO in front? But it's only going to be the vowels. It's either going to be A or O. Try them both. Notion. No, I don't know a word like notion. Notion. Oh, yeah, notion. They'll put MO. Oh, yeah, motion. So what do we do with vacation? We put that in front. Try the short for vacation. Oh, no, that's not a word. Oh, it's vacation. Do you see how they have such a good vocabulary? Just get them close.
Yeah.
They're like a magnet. Just get them close and they'll get it. We don't perseverate on getting, the open syllable is always long, a closed syllable. Then they stay at 2nd grade reading level. So we can get them up to their 7th and 9th grade reading level just by playing. So I just can't wait to hear from her that he's going to go from having to memorize CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant, cat, kind of that, because he didn't get them all right, to doing shun. He's going to be doing investigation by next month. And what a different view he'll have of himself. So you see just that opportunity to show the stretch. You have a unit, put it in two syllables. If they can do cat, they can do napkin. Because see, it's the very same thing, just to whisper it. If they can't get it saying it 5 times each, whisper it. The 5th time, it'll go over to the brain. That's something I learned. You can whisper to cross over. We kind of sneak it under the barbed wire, I guess, and whatever is going on. But those are, So the fun of just playing with words. And that's why I love to hear the stories of parents say how they couldn't believe. And then you go to start at the back of the book. Nothing sequential. We right brainers have no reverence for sequencing. We're way out to lunch on that. We just lost the boat entirely. We don't do math and sequencing. We don't. So I would, if my kids were older and they couldn't add, we added algebra problems because it was adding and it was in a sophisticated setting. So you see, we get those basic units like you talked about, the fundamentals, but teach it in a setting that makes them feel smart. I had a large part of my kids were identified as two Xers, twice Xers, the two exceptions. So 90 to 109 is a good IQ to have. It's an average IQ. We all can do great with that. But in school, if they're over 120, they're in the gifted programs. I had kids who were 135. They were all smarter than I was. But what we found, they were gifted, but why were they in my language arts class? WUZ for was, SHUR for sure.
Yeah.
Same things. So I learned then that I had to teach the units in a larger, more sophisticated setting. Remember, they always say you learn your original language once you start learning a second language. I learned that if I gave them a very hard problems or very hard long word, but broke it down only one piece at a time. Okay, Sean got that. Don't have to worry about that again. Or in, okay, yeah, we know in. What are we going to do with the 10 here? In 10. Oh, what would that be? Intention. Oh, yeah. So put it in a bigger, harder setting. You've noticed that with your kids, haven't you? You give them something hard to do and they blow you away.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they love the challenge, the, and so, yeah, I mean, that's what we had to do. Our middle child didn't like to read, but he loved cars, and so we gave him a car magazine and he wanted to really learn about the cars. And so we gave him the challenge of, here is the car magazine with all the big words and everything else. And he really worked hard because he really wanted that. And it started clicking because, he would see engine, he would see tires, he would see the sight words, he would see the other stuff, and it's just finally started clicking. But it took a longer time, but he had math down, years. He was years ahead.
Yeah, and math, yeah.
Yeah. But he just didn't have the reading and writing. He just had some issues he had to work out, and we had no clue what we were doing. Everybody kind of like, I don't know if that's a good thing, but and that's why I love doing the Homeschool Connect Expo to let people know that they're not alone, because we didn't know what we were doing when we first started. We were the first generation of homeschooler in our family. I would have never thought we would be homeschooling, and so we didn't have a lot of resources when it came to that. Luckily, we worked because we got to know the kids and tried a couple different things, But your program, the Right Brain program, is there like an age limit, or do we have to hit it really young, or could pretty much anybody that might have?
I want to tell you, by the way, your example is perfect of how homeschoolers have those strategies already in them. Like you got them car magazines. You already know. I just encourage that little wild out of the box thinking that you guys come up with.
Yeah.
And say, go for it.
Yeah.
So your question was, do I have?
Is there an age limit?
Thank you. So no, there isn't, because unless you've had a hemispherectomy, everyone has a right brain. The right brain is the storage unit. The key to the storage unit of the right brain is pictures, color, emotion. So we use it, of course, with kindergartners. Kindergartners all start out with their right brain. They're kinesthetic at that point. Later on, the kinesthetic needs to transfer to their visual. Otherwise, they'll stay so far behind because manipulatives take so much longer. But we can do manipulatives in our head once we've seen it there. But no, in kindergarten, we teach it all right brain, don't we? You still have a fair amount of color and picture in first grade, don't you? But by the time we get to high school, no one's helping you out there with color or picture. No. So it's an excellent way. In fact, Tony Buzan has his book, Use Both Sides of Your Brain, Buzan, Buzan. And he talks about how kids have even gotten into Cambridge by taking the notes, university, which is very hard to get into, their notes from their high school history class, and they make pictures of them. And so they call them visual mnemonics. We love Sam Bircher's books, vocabulary. I don't know if you know his vocabulary cartoons, where he teaches, like the first one is abduct. and it has a masked man. Now, of course, would look normal, but masked man came with 2 ducks under his arms, chasing away to sell abducted ducks. So it's, yeah, teach.
Okay.
So no, where there's no age limit. In fact, I tell you, the older we get, the more we need these strategies. They're memory strategies, memory hooks. So
Okay.
the regular way of interventions, the traditional way that we have tried to give remedial work to these guys is by repeating it and using the traditional auditory. And I said, if they're not getting it auditorily, present it in a picture with the auditory on it. It's that embedding. And so one mom said, but I told them, I said, just remember for that child, if it comes out of your mouth, it's going down their left toe. Just picture that every time.
Okay.
You realize you need to have a magic marker in your hand anytime you're giving instructions to that one. And then, oh yeah, they've got it. When we teach this to teachers in services, they say, I say, you know what? You have like probably 2/3 of your class with you. If you want to get that last third, and you can, when you're saying it, write it. When you have anything you want to have remembered, put it in colored chalk. If you really want it remembered, have a stick figure there. If you want to have a for sure everyone remembers it, have them spit on his shoe.
That is outside the box. And that's why I love it, because those things, those extra big items and thoughts and everything else, that's how I learn, some things, and I go back to them. I have a speech impediment, and there's some things that I have to go back through and remember something weird to then remember how to go through the process.
You make associations.
Yeah.
Yes. And brainers tend to make more, if they're strong auditory, they'll make auditory, they call them mnemonics. Each letter stands for something.
Yeah.
Our guys make it in the picture. Picture is worth
yeah.
1,000 words.
Yes. And what's amazing about it is, when I do a lot of marketing for large companies, but once I started going into the marketing and seeing some of the things, and even like when you study jingles and color associations of, what restaurants are what and why they use different colors, and it starts really opening up your brain of like, wow, these are fundamental little things that they've been able to unlock, and we don't even know it, and they're doing it to us, and we're remembering, and I always laugh because everybody was like, well, the music's not a big deal, what you put in your ears. I'm like, yeah, but your brain remembers it, and I'll say the jingle of the old McDonald's, not old McDonald's, the McDonald's old jingle, about their hamburger, and I'll stop, and people will to all beef patties. I mean, and they just and they can go through it, and I'm like, that TV commercial has not been on for almost 15, 16 years. And it's just embedded in our brain.
Embedded, it's a perfect word. In fact, we could take a lot of our lessons from Hollywood.
Yeah.
They use music, of course, to set the tone. They do jingles, like you said. They do pictures, and they do vivid color, and they add a lot of humor. Anytime you want something to stick, you have a slapstick. Basically, you just, it has to fall down. And I can't believe how my 8th graders hung in with all the silly drawings I did. And then people would say, but I can't draw very well. I said, no, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because if they're making fun of you, guess what? It's sticking. They'll say in college, yeah, I always remember that spelling word because my mom did this really silly thing with it.
Yeah, and you're welcome.
We could take that workbook, all those pages of writing and circling, and say, okay, no, let's just use those words. Let's play with them and take a picture every day. So you make a big check. I tell the bears we could just put a check there that we did those 5 pages, but we did them differently. And it hooks. I love the way it makes lifetime learners.
Yes.
Because even now, to my husband's dismay, I have my credit card numbers memorized so that I can be in bed or in the car or anywhere and order without having to look at my card.
Yeah.
But why? Because I have little stories about them. And every time we have to change a thing, oh my goodness, somebody's going to have to marry a really young person, or but you see how it's very helpful to. It keeps you very elastic.
Yes.
If we can just think about the fact that we can use those workbooks, the worksheets that the kids have, use them for yourself as a teaching tool with flip charts. I would like it if every Office Depot sold out of flip charts, because whiteboard, you see, has a gain, but we have to erase it.
Yeah.
And we can't quickly flip back. Oh, how many words did we learn? Oh, what did we say about that, Sean? What's that picture we used last time? So
Okay.
I like flip charts.
Wow. Okay.
We moved from house to house with them, as you
Yeah.
can imagine.
Yeah, I love that. I love the thought of a flip chart. And we used whiteboards, but like you said, they would be gone.
Mhm.
On there. So the I have your website up, and one of the questions was, how do I start? And your website answers, looking for a place to start, and it goes through 1 through 8, and it gives things that they can download, articles, explanations. I mean, you have provided an unbelievable amount of ways to get started. And once they finished, once the parents finished this part and just kind of really understanding what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, of
You're right.
scheduling a consultation, or
We have little assessments on there so they can figure out where they are. And we have a business number. I don't know if that's on there, but it's 303-694-0532. Am I seeing it there?
yes.
Oh, yes, and we've now actually started picking up because it to be just a mail, so they could leave their message, and we just try to pick that up. This is what people probably don't realize, just because we're a little crazy over here, is that when anybody gets any product at all, as far as we're concerned, we are in there for life. So they can call us 2 years from now. They can call us 10 minutes later and say our email is so good. The craft at East Central is a good one. And what we do is we try to get them to let us know what part is working and what part isn't. Don't get stuck, because we've probably seen every single scenario there could be now. I had 3,000 kids alone in my library here for 15 years. They would fly in for a day, even towards the end of the last 5 years I did it. And we would find out what was going on with the child, videotape what they should do. They went back and they worked it. So we've seen so many different things that sometimes it just takes one sentence. Or takes a whole, you know what, would you videotape your child doing that exercise? I need to see what's happening. So they put it on the phone. We look at it and say, okay, you're doing this part right, but I see why you're not seeing the results. Change this and let us know. So we stay coaching with them all year, the next year. Yeah, so if anything is confusing, and it always wants to be, these kids aren't as straightforward, but I just see it. They say they have an auditory processing problem or a visual. I say that's good to know. And the brain integration will take care of that. But what subject are they behind? What's it affecting them? Because we can have a visual processing problem or auditory and not be behind in anything. Well, that's life. We don't have to make it perfect. But if it's affecting their ability to be really, I wouldn't say on grade level, just because the world is. And I know many times people say we don't look at grade level. I say, well, then we have to move to a different world, which is sort of happening, it looks like.
Mhm.
But otherwise, we really want to have them. The reason is they're comparing themselves all the time. That's why I like the idea of thinking of the oral reading as an audience before a piano recital. So think of yourself sitting there in the audience as a parent. The piano recital teacher gets up, and your precious child is there, just clammy hands, ready to play the piano. And she says, "Oh, I'm going to have him play a new something he's never seen. And let's just see how many notes he knows." Right. You never do that. So in a recital, if they make a mistake, what does everybody do? Clap louder,
Right.
right? And that's I want them in not to be the person who say, "Oh, just say that one again. Just try that word. You know that one."
Mhm.
Shh, the message. So after I was so blessed that I think one of my very first years of teaching that I taught in an inner city school. And these guys are true gang members. So if I was going to get them to read anything other than a license plate, I needed to really get them to trust me. So that's when we started with the long words, spelling psychology forwards and backwards. And I got the and putting up on the overhead projector. They were used to doing their old phonics, third grade phonics. There are sixth, seventh, eighth graders, and we did all the shuns and the mints. They said, "You guys are guessing at these words, but I think you really know them." And we color them. So I learned a lot with the message. The message. Once we get the message to them that we believe they're right, but we have to give the evidence saying they're right. Haven't we all had that? You did something horribly, and they said, "Oh, you just did that great." The praise that we know our loved ones give us and we appreciate. But what's the best praise is they can spell it, they can read it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we try to make it getting started easy. They can, but sometimes people just email us and say, "I read that getting started and I just don't know. Too many words." So,
Yeah.
okay, we'll break that down to how old is he? What subject? Right.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. I know we were talking and it's been an hour and I could keep going for hours more. Like I said, I think I could talk to you for a long time just because I'm so fascinated of I love the lifetime learners and the ongoing learning and I'm really love that part of homeschooling and where parents might have issues or thoughts of how do I do this with my child that might have some of these issues and I love that you've been able to put something together like this to help out, and I appreciate you being a part of Homeschool Connect Expo. I've really gotten love to get to know you more and what you do, and we're going to be doing more of these, and we'll jump on a different subject and kind of go through and maybe sit down and really have a good conversation about, a couple different topics,
Yeah.
over the next couple months. Cause I think it's going to be really important, for us to reach, out to the new homeschoolers and homeschooler families that are, might have a child that have some issues now and they're trying to figure out what to do.
Bright, hardworking kids who have to work too hard to learn.
Yeah. And that's really, I mean, that what it is. I mean, and I love how you've been able to put this together in a very simple, easy way to get the right brain.
Yeah, very
For
forgiving process. Thank you. It's so fun to share this. It's a God-driven process, and we still enjoy it. We can't give it up. And so I'm so glad to have this platform because you understand it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
It's
appreciate it so much. Thank you for being a part of this, and I look forward to doing this more and more over the next couple months.
That'd be fun. We'll be here anytime. Thank you,
All
Sam.
right. Hey, appreciate it. And everybody go out to the expo, check out her booth. She has some great speaking sessions out there as well. And then click on the her website and get all the information, get started, get moving, and call when you're ready to have a conversation. But thank you for everyone and have a great weekend. We'll see you back on Monday.